Hi everyone, welcome back to Mixed Media Soul Sparks. Sandra Duran Wilson here, and in this episode I'm going to show you a way to get some incredible textures, but using some unusual materials. You know, you can go to the store and you can buy a lot of products. I prefer Golden for their pastes and gels, and I have other episodes if you want to see how to create texture using some of those. So check out the YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel, and you'll be notified when new episodes come out. But this one is a little different. So let's jump right in. I'm using an ampersand panel. It's a cradle board. This is one of their value series. So I have started off with just putting some color on here. I think I used just a paint, a red iron oxide. You could use gesso, or you could just keep it white. It's up to you if your panel is already gessoed. I didn't want to have just the white, so I want you to be able to see what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to be using is actually joint compound, and it's a building product. This one is actually pink, and it will, when it dries, it'll be white. But you don't have to have that. I just grabbed what was at the store. And the other thing I'm going to be using is this plaster wrap, which you can find in the craft stores. And this is, usually you find it in the kids section because you can make a lot of cool things with it. And Elmer's glue. I'm going to be using that. So the joint compound is very soft. It's used in the construction industry for putting tape on wallboard, but it needs to be sealed with something. So if it gets wet, it's crumbly again. The glue is the component that's going to help seal it. You're still going to need to seal this afterward, and I'll show you in the finished piece I have. But let's just get started with this, and I'm going to mix together some of the joint compound with the glue. Is there a specific formula? Not really. I just kind of wing it. So you'll see how much I put in here. It's probably about that much, if you can tell. So maybe about 10 to 1. You could do a little bit more glue. And then I'm also going to add some water just to help hydrate the gauze. But you want to mix this pretty well. You know, if you wanted to add a little bit of a gel or a paste to this mixture, you could, just to change the viscosity of it. But to me, the whole point of doing this is to avoid using some of those products just because of cost, or maybe you don't have them. So this is a good way to get a nice consistency. I don't think I'm going to need to add any water. My other batch I had was older and it was starting to dry up. Now this is just a regular gauze that has plaster in it. So rather than completely dipping this in water, I'm just going to spray some water on it. And then I'm going to take and put some of this onto the surface first. Some people like to put a layer of gauze down first and let that dry. I don't really find that's necessary, as long as I have a good enough surface here to get the gauze to stick to it. Now you see what I'm doing? Just gonna scrunch it up. It's a little dry over here. Spray a little more water. And when you put the water on the gauze, you see how when I rub it, that plaster goes all into the holes of the gauze. And then you can build this up to any kind of texture that you want. You can make like big folds, you can make ripples. You see how it kind of tore there, so you have a limited working time. You gotta be fairly quick with this. And then you can just continue to layer, overlapping these pieces. Pay attention to the edges. In fact, you might need to come back in with a little of the mixture on top. And again, this pink will dry white. So this will all be white. And then I'll show you how I plan to paint it. But there's one other little thing that you can do as well to make a different kind of texture. And this one is just using tissue paper. And this isn't any special tissue paper, it just came in some packing materials. You could probably even use newsprint or different types of paper. So again, I'm going to put my joint compound glue mixture down first. And I'm going to put the tissue paper on, put another layer on here, kind of building layers of it. And this you really don't need to add extra water to it. Otherwise that tissue paper will really kind of break down a lot. Again, pay attention to the edges. And either way, you can keep building up with tissue paper, you can use the gauze, you can come back in, you can even just come in here, and I'm just going to put the rest of this right onto this panel and show you that you can just treat this as if it were an acrylic paste, because that's kind of the consistency that it has. See, I'm using a knife rather than a brush. You can make marks in it like this. And when this gets dry, I can just go in and trim off the extra paper, or I could run it around the side if I wanted to. But let me just show you what you're going to end up with. I kind of like to make sure I don't have any big air pockets in there, so it'll make sure it's adhered well. So this is what you're going to end up with. This is the piece where I added tissue paper. And this part I've actually going to seal with a matte medium. Here I tried a little experiment. I put some paint on it before I had sealed it. And the paint just really soaked in and rehydrated that tissue paper and the joint compound. So I got this kind of muddy look. But if I just take the medium straight out of the bottle with a wet brush and paint it over, that's going to really seal the surface. So now when I come back over with paint, it will sit up on the surface, and this is permanently sealed. I don't have to worry about that rehydrating. Now let me show you the one that I did with the plaster gauze. Again, it was also sealed. It's pretty heavy. It's on a board like we did before, but you can see the deep textures that I've gotten. And if you look in really close here, you can still see some of the gauze coming through. I decided to leave that because now when I paint this, it's going to go in there in some areas it's going to stay on the surface, some it's going to sink down in there a bit. And this is a beautiful texture that I got just using the mixture. And I put a little bit of plastic wrap over it when it was drying, and so I got these interesting bubbles. This has already been sealed. On this one I used a gloss medium. just this. And now I'm going to try a little of this transparent red iron oxide. Very diluted, but look at, oh, this is quinacridone gold, I think. Yeah, quinacridone gold. As soon as I put that on there, I'm like, that's not red iron oxide. Now, if I put the paint on thicker, you can see the differences of how it's going to sit in that surface. And I like to actually put some on and then wipe some of it off and really build up these beautiful layers. So look at the difference when you start to wipe it off, how it sits in some of those crevices. This is a sepia, more of an earth color. So, you can play around with whatever colors you want and let these build up. But the beautiful part is that once it is sealed, you don't have to worry about it rehydrating. So that's a very important step to do in your surface. And whether you use tissue paper or just put the mixture together onto the wood surface. Now, you've seen me working on panel. You could do this on canvas as well, or even paper, because the glue is going to help hold everything together. So if you're working on, let's say, a stretched canvas, I would up the ratio of glue a little more, just to ensure that it's going to really stick onto there. So that's it. I'm excited about this piece. I'm going to work on it some, and see that little part right there, that I must have missed sealing it. That's a perfect example. So really look in here. You see how the paint went into the joint compound, and here it sits on the surface. So it's really important, if you want this kind of look, to make sure you put an adequate seal onto that. Okay, great example. So have some fun with this, make some incredible textures. There is some drying time involved. This is pretty thick, so I would let it dry maybe a day or two, depending on your weather conditions. And remember to have it dry sufficiently before you seal it. Then you can seal it, and then you can paint it. So it's a multiple step process, but it's definitely worth it. Check out my other videos on creating textures, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I will see you the next time. Go to the links in the bio and for my website and all that other good stuff. So I'll see you next time.